Working at the SCP Foundation has never been an easy job, but through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, you've been able to work your way up from being a lowly intern to being a fully fledged member of the Foundation's science team. Sometimes the work can be tough. After all, most of the SCPs under your supervision are direct threats to humanity. One SCP you never thought you'd have a problem with was 049, also known as the Plague Doctor. SCP-049 is usually cooperative, even sometimes sharing the findings from his research with the science team. But today, he's somehow breached containment, and worse still, he seems to have a problem with you. According to 049, you've been infected with the pestilence. What does that mean? Why is that so dangerous? And what can you do to get this monstrous medieval medic to take a chill pill and go back to his cell without incident? It'll be a tricky task, but it's doable. This is you versus SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. First, let's take a look at what you're up against in a physical sense. The Plague Doctor is a humanoid entity, roughly 190 centimeters or 6 foot 4 inches tall. His imposing stature is only amplified by his appearance. As the name suggests, he appears to be dressed in the thick robes, hat, and beaked mask of a medieval plague doctor. He's usually seen carrying an old-fashioned doctor's bag that seems to contain an infinite number of surgical tools. At the time of his capture, he also wielded a large cane, similar to the kind used by plague doctors to examine patients from a distance, although this cane was eventually confiscated by Foundation personnel, as is standard procedure for any possessions of anomalies that could potentially be used as weapons. Unlike many SCPs, the Plague Doctor is not only highly intelligent, but capable of being reasoned with, which is a huge point in your favor. SCP-049 speaks in a variety of languages, but his preferences are English and medieval French. When he was first discovered in the town of Montauban, France, he willingly went into Foundation custody. This SCP is generally very cooperative and reasonable, particularly with scientists, as he considers them to be his peers as fellow men of medicine. In containment, he is regularly provided with corpses on which to perform experiments, and after he completes them, he's often eager to discuss these findings with staff. This cordial relationship makes the Plague Doctor a very manageable prisoner, but don't be fooled. His interactions with staff must be closely monitored. Due to his high intelligence as well as naturally intimidating aura, SCP-049 can be very persuasive to anyone not mentally prepared for an encounter with him. If you aren't careful, you might end up being convinced to, say, give him a human subject for his experimentation, which is strictly forbidden by his containment guidelines. Or, as was evidently the case today, he might just be able to convince you to let your guard down and let him out of containment. So the first line of defense against this SCP is to simply not give him a chance to appeal to your ego or engage you in any kind of mind games. Someone less familiar with this SCP might think that letting him out isn't a big deal. Other than being a creepy, super smart humanoid with a magic bag full of strange surgical tools, he doesn't seem actively malicious. What's the harm in giving him a bit of freedom? Well, SCP-049's polite attitude has one very important exception. If he decides a person has been infected with pestilence, he'll become incredibly aggressive toward them. Now, you've worked with the Foundation for a while, so you know the basics of how SCP-049 behaves. When SCP-049 singles you out from your team, you suspect he may have seen you exhibit some kind of symptom, but you know he's generally a creature that can be appealed to with logic. When you notice SCP-049 becoming hostile in your presence, you might try and show him your vaccination records to try and prove that you aren't suffering from any sort of pestilence. However, that's unlikely to work. You see, nobody can quite figure out the criteria that 049 has for what pestilence is, and he has so far refused to explain himself in interviews with the Foundation staff. In fact, 049 gets extremely annoyed if the subject is ever brought up, calling the Foundation doctors simple-minded amateurs for not being able to intuit what the pestilence is, or what the symptoms are. So even if you're all up to date on your measles, tetanus, rabies, and hepatitis shots, and your most recent Foundation issue COVID test came back negative, SCP-049 won't find that sufficient proof that you're pestilence-free. What does SCP-049 do to people that he decides have been infected? Well, as he does consider himself a doctor, his stated intention is to cure people, and that's good. But by curing them, we actually mean he kills them, and that's bad. SCP-049 can kill with a single touch, and Foundation personnel have yet to conclusively find out the exact cause of death in any of 049's victims. The most important rule when it comes to surviving a run-in with SCP-049 is to dress for the occasion. SCP-049 can kill anyone instantly just by touching their skin. And if that wasn't bad enough, he's also incredibly fast, able to close the distance between you and him in a matter of seconds. You're no Usain Bolt, so there's probably no way that you'll be able to outrun him. So the best way to prevent your sudden death is by wearing thick clothing that leaves as little skin exposed as possible. As a member of the science team, your lab coat and gloves should do nicely. Keeping your skin safe from unwanted toxins is, after all, what they're designed to do. Tie a scarf or something similar around your neck to protect your throat, and if possible, cover your ears and face with a beanie or ski mask. And if you aren't already wearing them, it might be wise to change into jeans, thick socks, and closed-toed shoes. It might be tricky to track all these things down without leaving the office, but trust us, it's essential to surviving an SCP-049 containment breach. His lethal touch is so potent that any exposed skin at all will put you at risk. If you can, donning a full Foundation-issue hazmat suit definitely wouldn't be an overreaction. Before killing a person that he deems infected with pestilence, SCP-049 will begin by asking typical questions that any doctor would ask a patient about their medical history. Then, with frightening speed, he descends on his victims to deliver his lethal touch. Sometimes killing the person is enough for SCP-049 to consider them cured, but other times it doesn't have the effect that he was going for. SCP-049 will show remorse for the killing, lamenting the fact that the pestilence is still present in some way in his patient, and this is the point where his treatment gets a little more complex and a lot more weird. If you thought being instantly killed with a single touch was bad, you'll really hate hearing about what happens afterward. If the person killed by 049 is decided to still have signs of pestilence, SCP-049 will produce a variety of surgical tools from the doctor's bag that he carries and begin performing surgery on the dead body. The tools used in this surgery vary from scalpels and forceps to a variety of vials and syringes full of fluids that the SCP calls the essence of the four humors. The four humors, in case you aren't aware, were a concept popular in medieval European medicine. The idea is that the body contains four fluids or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that an imbalance of them is what causes sickness. The idea has obviously been disproven since, but given that 049 resembles a medieval plague doctor and claims to have originated in the 15th century, it makes sense that this idea of treatment would align with medieval beliefs and theories. Once the corpse has been dissected and had its humors thoroughly equalized, a process that usually takes several days, it may then reanimate them as a mindless, shambling zombie, known in the Foundation as an SCP-049-2. This doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's always bad news. Even though SCP-049 considers these reanimated people to be cured, he does admit that it isn't a perfect cure, but to us it sounds like a pretty big understatement. Indeed, instances of SCP-049-2 retain no memories or higher brain function, and while they're normally docile, they can become very aggressive if provoked, or if SCP-049 directs them to attack. While 049 obviously prefers to practice his cure on human beings, most instances of 049-2 that you would encounter in the Foundation building would be animals. SCP-049 is given animal corpses to experiment on once every 2 weeks. These animals are most frequently livestock, particularly cows, but SCP-049 also has experimented on other animals, including an orangutan that he was ultimately unable to revive. Though they behave in an erratic and sometimes violent manner, 049-2 instances are, like most classic movie zombies, relatively easy to put down. There's no evidence in Foundation documents to suggest that anything more than conventional weapons is required to dispatch them. Once dispatched, the corpses should be taken to be incinerated as soon as possible. As for SCP-049 himself, while he's a terrifying and imposing figure, if you can avoid his zombified minions and deadly touch, it's surprisingly easy to get him back into containment. Sedatives have been proven to work on this SCP and are part of the standard protocols for transporting him from place to place. Getting a needle through SCP-049's thick leather-like hide may be somewhat difficult, especially under duress, so you might want to consider administering the sedative orally. SCP-049 doesn't technically require any sustenance, but he has been seen to enjoy food and believes that eating helps him keep in the right frame of mind to practice his experiments. So, if you can bribe him with a snack, you might be able to sneak the sedatives in that way. Some of SCP-049's favorite foods include salted pork, crackers, and hard cheese. So if you can figure out how to hide a pill in any of those, go right ahead and give it a try. Additionally, tests have also shown that the application of lavender has a calming effect on this SCP, much like it sometimes does on humans. Lavender contains a compound called linalool, a type of alcohol that can produce an anti-anxiety effect when inhaled. The effect of linalool is apparently heightened in the case of SCP-049 because in the SCP's dossier, lavender is the first recommended method for subduing him. Once he's been sedated or otherwise subdued, a locked collar, restraints, and a pair of armed guards are all that's needed to transport him back to containment. So if you followed all these guidelines, you'll be perfectly equipped to survive an encounter with SCP-049. The security team is brought in, But as SCP-049 is subdued and led back to his containment cell, he gives you a final cryptic warning. You're denying yourself salvation from the one true sickness that plagues the world of men. If you do not allow me to advance my research, it may be too late to save all those who have been stricken. With those words, the enigmatic and terrifying plague doctor is placed into restraints and escorted back to his cell, the armed guards locking the door behind him. After this encounter, the protocols are changed to discourage any further contact between staff and 049. The day continues as normal, and as soon as you clock off your shift, you decide it might be high time to organize a checkup with your regular doctor, just to be safe. Now check out the rest of our U vs. playlist for more tactics against terrors, and make sure to subscribe to our new SCP Explained channel for more from the SCP Foundation.